Hi, I'm Dr. Craig Chalquist. A couple of weeks ago, I was reading the news and I saw this article that caught my attention because it reminded me of other similar articles that I had been seeing for some time now. And the article said that soft skills are in very high demand in the world of work. Employers are looking for people with soft skills. And soft skills, of course, are relational skills, they're problem solving skills, creativity, clear communication, writing, things like that, handling yourself emotionally. And when I saw this article, it gave me this idea. So I have a really extensive work background, part of it in the corporate world, where I now continue to work occasionally as a consultant. And in the academic world, where I've had several executive level administrative roles, management roles, stuff like that. Been involved in hiring a lot of times as a hiring manager, as a part of a hiring team. And I thought, given all that and my background in psychology and psychotherapy, this is sort of my territory. Um, so why don't I do at least one video on demand, which I've now done. It's at Vimeo, and I'll put a link in so you can get to there. Why don't I do a video that offers an overview of soft skills, what's being looked for, in what order. There's different organizations that order them differently, but for the most part, there's a few that are up near the top pretty consistently. So why don't I offer that, what the list is, my 25, what I look for as a hiring manager, and then additionally go through the top 10 and make comments along the way based on my own work experience, and particularly the top three or four. So I've done that. Um, I'm selling the video for a whopping $30. And as I mentioned in the video itself, and I'd like to hear comments by you, I'm really open to doing more videos on this topic. And they could be things like interviewing skills, job interviewing skills, for when you're in an interview. Um, I could take bundles of soft skills in the list of 25, which is the grand total that I offer in the first video on demand. And I can bundle them and do videos on each of those. So that's a possibility. So let me know what you think. Um, Meanwhile, since I don't like videos that are just ads, I'm not gonna do that to you. I'm gonna offer you a soft skill that I think is particularly important. It's one that occasionally gets mentioned, but usually under the umbrella of something called emotional intelligence. But it's a quiet skill, and yet it will save your life. And that's not an exaggeration. I mean, it's something that we all need in any work arena, in any personal arena. So the soft skill I wanted to offer something about goes under the name of emotional self-regulation, regulating your feelings. So I don't think here in the States, I don't think there's one person in 100 and maybe 1,000 who can actually sit with an uncomfortable feeling. It's kind of sad, actually. Um, Folks who go to therapy are somewhat of an exception, and hopefully therapists are more of an exception. But, by and large, you go to therapy, you're sitting with something that hurts, you go home and then turn on the TV. So, what I want to do is talk about what this means, self regulation, especially in a work setting, right? So, when we don't have this skill and something makes us anxious or angry or frustrated, one of the first things we do is to try to change the external world to make us feel better. Sometimes this is the right move. Sometimes it's absolutely not. Sometimes intervening that way will make the situation worse. And a classic example of this is when you see people badgering other people for something, information, answers, whatever it is, and the people being badgered withdraw more and more. And you talk to them behind the scenes and they say, I don't even want to work with this person anymore. I'm not going to deal with them. I'm going to ignore them. So it's completely counterproductive. The more you push most people, the more they'll flee. So that's no good. Not that there's not times to be pushy, but sometimes it just totally backfires. So, a couple of skills for emotional self regulation, and let's do this in steps that overlap a little bit. But skill number one is identification of what you're feeling. And you would think that's easy, it's not, particularly when you're stressed. So, your mind and body have a way of disconnecting in order to protect you from intolerable emotional states or from ongoing stress or what have you. And so what happens often is we get upset by something and we don't even realize how upset we are. And I think we've all had the conversation where we go home at the end of the workday and we're talking to a partner, a friend, whoever it is. And right in the middle of the conversation, we may start raging or crying or whatever. And then there's this insight of, wow, I didn't know this was really affecting me like this, right? So, what you want to do is acquire the ability to know before then that yes, it's affecting you, no question about it. So, identification is the first step. You know, you might be in a meeting, and here's where your body comes into it. You might be in a meeting and you're hearing something you don't want to hear, or you open an email and it gives you bad news. A lot of people in the tech world are getting those emails right now. And something like that, right? Something upsetting, or a coworker goes off on you. Um, and so your body registers this. And if you're paying attention to your body, you'll notice that your breathing will change. Your heart will start beating faster. Your skin might feel different. There might be other signs. So you want to pay attention to that. You want to start making a practice of using your body to register what's going on, because your body will tell you not only about the situation, but about how you're feeling about it. So when I did men's groups years ago, groups for court referred guys who got in trouble with their anger, one of the first things that I learned to teach them was to rate their level of upset on a 1 to 10 scale. So they'd be talking to somebody, a partner at work, wherever, and they'd start getting upset. Their body would start reacting. And so I would teach them to rate themselves. All right, where are you on the scale right now? A 2, a 3? You can feel your heart beating faster, you're breathing deeper, things like that, right? So, whatever the setting is, the first part of self regulation of emotion is knowing what's going on with you, and your body can cue you in. So, number one, identification. And then number two, we start into regulation. So, when it's an unpleasant feeling, we need a couple of things. One is we need to receive it into our bodies in a way that our body can use their natural power to deal with it. And often that means some sort of deep breathing. It doesn't have to be obvious, but just a deeper breathing to calm down a little bit, get more centered, that kind of thing. And then also the space to be able to feel what the feeling is, or at least to recognize that I can't do that right now. I need to put it to one side, which means stopping thinking about it and thinking about something else. If you do that before you identify the feeling, it can sneak up on you. But if you're aware of what the feeling is, then you can honor it and say, I'll deal with you later. I got a critical situation right now, right? So that's part of regulation. And I mentioned before sitting with the feeling. So it's important to, and this totally depends on the situation that you're in. Sometimes you can't just get up and leave a meeting. Sometimes you absolutely have to. You just need to for yourself, right? So being able to take a few minutes during the workday and to really sit with the feeling. Now, when you first start learning to do this, it can feel counterproductive and really awful. So you may be plunged into anger or plunged into fear or anxiety or whatever it is. But the great thing about your emotions is they regulate themselves if they're allowed to. So when you sit with something like that, at first it's very intense, but then if you leave it alone, you just pay attention to it and not try to alter it in any way, it will start to move and then start to flow. Feelings are a flow in the mind and the body. So the more time you have to spend on this, the more you'll be able to see that your feeling will begin to finish itself and flow through you. Think about it in comparison to something like happiness or joy, right? We don't suddenly say to ourselves, well, I've been joyous for 10 minutes. I better do something to shut it off. It ends itself, right? Same thing with feelings that are unpleasant. They'll end themselves if we give them space to. So the idea here is to deal with whatever needs to be dealt with immediately and then retreat somewhere and just sit with the feeling. Another way of saying this is that we're containing the feeling. So when let's say you're in a meeting and things are getting kind of hot and unpleasant and people are sniping at each other, or maybe they're sniping at you. So to take a breath, to consciously sit with the feeling, and then to decide on what your response is going to be. And it needs to be a response rather than a reaction. If it's a reaction, it'll just escalate the situation. Saw this all the time, not just in the corporate world and the academic world, but in couples therapy when I was working with couples. Right? It just escalates. Someone's got to take a breath. Someone's got to stop and just have a mature response instead of a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old emotional response, right? So the more you practice containing these feelings, the more you acquire psychic muscle to do it even better in the future. It does get easier with time. And there's always going to be unpleasant things to sit with, but if you can do it consciously, you'll be far more effective on the level of emotional intelligence and relatability to other people in the workplace. And this in turn increases something else that's in demand as a soft skill, which is dependability. People need to be able to depend on you to be rational, to be calm in your reactions, even when you're upset, to be safe to be around, right? So try practicing this. And the last piece, the last part of it I'll mention is something I touched on earlier, where you have to talk to someone, especially if it's really upsetting news. You get an email and it says, "Thanks for working with us, bye," or some horribly abusive thing like that, or somebody attacks you who you thought was an ally or whatever it is. So once you've done the containing and the sitting with the feelings and the fashioning of an adult response, refusing to escalate the situation, and you've done all that stuff, so you need to talk to somebody about what happened. It doesn't have to be a therapist. It can be a friend, a lover, whoever it is, but you need to talk to somebody, because otherwise you're going to carry it and it will sit in you. So to use anger as an example, and I saw this all the time with the men I worked with. So they would have a low level anger that was permanent, and then they would take it into the workplace, and because they didn't talk about it, somebody would prod them at the wrong time and it would explode, right? So obviously you don't want that to happen. So talk to somebody so you can emote. That's one of the things that we do with each other as human beings. We all process feelings by talking to each other, or we should, right? That's part of emotion management too. So in the video I mentioned, the video on demand called Soft Skills, I don't go into that much detail for most of them. And that's what's on the table here. If you want me to, say something in comments, or just email me through my website, chalkwist.com, and say, hey, I'd like to know, are you available to do more with this? A video, a Zoom session, something like that, right? So just let me know. But for the video on demand, I wanted to keep it under an hour. So I gave you some of the research on what employers are asking for. And by the way, this also applies to consultants. So you may not be in a regular 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 workplace, but you still need to have these skills if you're going to succeed with your clients, right? So it gives you that, what some of the news is about why these skills are in demand. And then I list 25. I also give you the 10 skills that Forbes talks about. And then after that, I go through the top 10. And as I mentioned earlier, the first 3 or 4 in a little bit more detail, and then I touch on suggestions for the rest. So really hope it's useful. Let me know if you need more of that. Thanks so much.